Have you noticed a change in your eating habits during the pandemic? Our Sydney Stallworth tells us why you might need to be concerned on this week's Mental Health Monday.
Your mood does affect the foods that you gravitate towards for sure.
The International Food Information Council Foundation says more than 40% of parents in the U.S. are snacking more during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in a separate survey, they found that more than 4 out of 5 consumers say the pandemic has changed their food habits, making them cook, eat, shop, and think about food differently. And this could be for a number of reasons.
There could be some fear, and that fear can turn into anxiety. And that anxiety can lead to depressive feelings and emotions. So any changes in appetite, increase or decrease, any changes in sleep, an increase in sleep or a decrease in sleep. Are you getting a little bit more irritable? Are you frustrated?
We met with the nutritionist and dietitian Becca DeWitt to talk about how some of these changes could look.
Depression, you kind of go for those quick energy foods because you have low energy or no energy to cook things. Food is just such a source of comfort. It releases all those endorphins in our minds. And that does definitely, it helps bring, a brief kind of relief or, mood lifter for those brief moments.
And if you find yourself turning to food more often than you usually would during the pandemic, you might be struggling with something deeper. DeWitt tells us she looks for these signs in her own life.
I struggle with depression as well, and that's one of my symptoms that I check in with myself, is that if I am eating more things more like chips or cookies more frequently, it's just a way for me to check in and gauge what my mental health status is.
Young people could be at an elevated risk. Even before the pandemic, childhood obesity was described as a pandemic of its own. Added stress and anxiety could cause more young people to turn to unhealthy eating habits. Some parents might notice changes.
So do not put any kind of weight loss or anything like that as a goal. A realistic goal would be something like I want to have more energy, or I want to be able to do XYZ that I haven't been able to do.
But clearing out the pantry of any and all junk food isn't the best way to handle the situation. And it's important to note, if you're struggling with your relationship with food, you should pay attention and seek help. Eating disorders are skyrocketing during the pandemic. Hotline calls to the National Eating Disorders Association have been up by 70 to 80%. For more Mental Health Monday stories, tips, and resources, head on over to RocketCityNow.com. Putting the Valley first, I'm Sydney Stallworth, WCDX News.